It started with an itch and a need to scratch. But being nocturnal as she was, it wasn't difficult to indulge every little desire that crossed her mind. Being used to horror stories that honestly didn't scare her, she commonly watched videos of jump scares and other related deviances on the internet. So it was common for her to forget her headphones and loud screaming to echo through the house. Her parents were used to it. Her siblings were used to it. In fact, due to it, nobody awoke whenever such an event happened. Plus, whenever a jump scare had actually managed to get her, her own screams fell upon deaf and sleeping ears. She wasn't feeling well for a week at least. By now, her pained cries from the bathroom were ignored. Kidney stones and gastrointestinal ulcers plagued her very existence, but she was grateful that it wasn't a combination of a UTI. Nevertheless, a burning sensation all throughout her abdominal cavity was far too familiar for her. When she really wanted to sleep, she found herself unable to because of it. Her body was used to being hyped up on caffeine and nicotine, and whenever she got the chance, her stomach was usually full of coffee and ramen. Her metabolism spiked, her total food intake decreased, and her issues simply worsened. She wasn't happy, but she had no drive to get better, no drive to stay awake long enough when the sun rose to get a doctor's appointment and see it through. She found herself in a hole of repeating agony, deprivation, and near continuous state of hallucinations, brought on by little to no sleep and large amounts of caffeine. So when she got the crawling sensation, she simply ignored it. First, it was in her throat. She thought she was smoking too much, so she tried easing up on it. When it was down in her stomach, she continued her usual pace of half a pack per gallon of coffee. Her body was used to this kind of abuse. But the crawling, it wasn't. When it was routing around her belly, she thought nothing of it. Just more issues bounding off her insides like they always did. When they wanted to get out, they would. But for this, she wasn't sure if she wanted it in. No, she wasn't sure if she even wanted it to get out. Then, her stomach quaked. The muscles all around her belly button followed. She felt things squeeze, followed by crawling. Panic. She threw the laptop out of her lap mid-creepypasta and discarded it without much caution, knowing her bowels needed much more attention at this juncture. Nearly slipping across the hardwood floor, she scrambled to the bathroom as fast as she could. Vehemently slamming the door and turning the light on, she was stunned by the sheer amount of light flooding into her eyes at once. Nearly blinded, she lifted the lid off the toilet and sat down, barely pulling boxers and panties out of the way of the bowel movement that was timed so awfully well. With her body vacated, she sighed. It was over. Then she felt the biting, the clawing, and the crawling. The pain made her squeeze, and the squeeze just caused more pain. Her own scream made chills run down her spine. It wasn't just out of pain, it was out of horror. She felt something jutting, starting to crawl out. Barely able to gather up the courage to do so, she opened her legs and peered into the bowl. She saw crimson and a black striped gold. Her second scream was worse than her first. Now that she knew what was giving her pain, she wasn't sure if she'd be able to face it. Spreading her legs more, she noticed that there was much more than just one crawler squirming around. The bowl was filled with them, and she noticed that one remained inside her, its antenna barely sticking out. The bowl wasn't the only thing with blood all over it. She was leaking blood. She gasped as she reached down and barely touched the antenna. She felt every leg squirm, and she let out a scream as she felt them attempt to pierce through the sensitive tissue. Tears flooding down her face, panic in every breath, and spasms in every muscle. She knew one thing was for certain. She was truly afraid for the first time in her life. But she knew better than to let it consume her. She swallowed whatever it was that fear did to her. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and the squirming in her urethra consumed her. She switched her brain off, separating herself from the situation, but she couldn't deny that it was her. She opened her eyes and looked down. It looked like something she'd find on one of the sites she frequents, on X, maybe. Something disgusting like this was definitely picture-worthy, but most would just say it's shot. So, even giving proof, there would be no point. The antenna poking out from between her thighs wriggled around, as if trying to find out where it is. "You're inside of me, you little shit," she thought. "And it's about time you get the fuck out." She gripped the antenna cautiously, her legs tensed, but she refused to stop. She knew she wouldn't be able to just glide the little fucker out. It had to be pulled. Pulling very gently on the antenna, she started to rock it back and forth, pulling more towards one thigh to the other, from the left to the right, slowly, very slowly, glacial almost. More and more blood came out, and the antenna she was pulling on it just started to produce more of the body. She felt its legs dragging behind it, scraping against the tissue, causing more and more tears as it went along. Her eyes felt like they would start crying blood. Her hands were unsteady, but she simply kept her right hand bracing against the counter, and her left busily rocking the crawler back and forth out of her. When its head was finally poking out, she sighed, but her head kept spinning. She started pulling again. When its legs started poking out, she nearly screamed out of anger. How could such little things cause so much fucking damage? But she felt each leg pop out with a little plut, 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 plut. She moved her fingers a little lower, gripping it underneath the head of the damned thing. The hyperventilation made each breath sound like a whimper. Plut, 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 plut. She moved her fingers down again. She could feel the blood lubricating at the crawler's escape. Plut, 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 plut. Her whimpers became augmented by the sheer amount of pain. Where the fuck is everyone? I need help. I need medical attention. God damn it, someone! She could feel the remaining portion of the centipede twirling around in her. Plut, 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 plut. Moving her fingers lower again, she tried to keep the head well out of biting distance. She figured it was the smallest convenience she could give herself in this time. She paused, feeling the crawler wriggle between her fingers, wriggle inside of her. Any comfort she found in that moment of silence was lost immediately to an avalanche of panic. Blood. Fuck, she screamed loudly as she gave the crawler a hard tug, moving it many legs at once. Blood squirted from her, and had enough pressure behind it to send it to the wall she was facing. She gasped, and she wanted to cry, but her eyes were dried out. Plut, 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 plut. Oh my God. She was near the end. The only reason she knew was because she recognized what it was, now that it was nearly completely out of her. Geophilus flavus. Plut, plut. Fuck! Plut. She held on to the tail end of the centipede that was once in her urethra, her hand shaking, her breath unsteady, and her lips were trembling. Blinking felt like a quick rub of sandpaper, and her urethra felt like she had just pulled a string of kidney stones out of her. The lights flickered. She opened her eyes. Confused on what the fuck just happened, she looked at her hands. Clean. She had chills racing up and down her spine. She managed to gather enough courage to look down. No blood. Knees. Knees. Knees are good. At least I'm completely here. Wait. She put her feet out in front of her, counting her toes. Okay. I'm all here. Okay. Okay. She figured the Rambo approach was best. She spread her thighs. Kidney stones.